Grandma was startled to see a small furball huddled in her front yard, crying and shivering. But she would soon find out that this wasn't any ordinary kitten and would do something selfless. The piercing cries yanked Grandma Lizzy out of her knitting, making her heart race. She fumbled to set aside her needles and shuffled quickly to the front door, her joints protesting with each step. As she swung the door open, the desperate cries hit her like a punch. Her eyes darted around the yard, finally landing on a small, quivering bundle of fur hidden near the edge of her flower bed. The sight was so unexpected and alarming that she felt a chill run down her spine. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of the trembling creature. Her heart went out to it. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered softly, even though she still couldn't quite see what it was. But then she hesitated, torn between leaving it there or bringing it in. The memory of her two beloved cat companions, who had passed away in quick succession about a month ago, was still fresh in her mind. The pain of their deaths had led her to vow never to adopt any more cats. She took a deep breath, her eyes still fixed on the trembling furball. Fate seemed to have put this creature right within her reach, and despite her reservations, she couldn't just leave it out there. Her compassionate nature won out, and she stepped forward. As she drew nearer, she could see it more clearly. A small, shivering furball, its eyes tightly closed, its tiny body convulsing with sobs. At first glance, it appeared to be a kitten, its fur soft and fluffy, a mixture of browns and whites that blended with the garden's natural hues. But as she knelt down for a closer look, something seemed amiss. The furball's ears were too large and pointed, its nose too slender and long for a typical kitten. It didn't quite match the appearance of any cat she had ever encountered. The creature's unusual coloring caught her eye too. It seemed almost too vibrant for a typical kitten. Despite the oddities, Grandma Lizzy didn't give the furball's appearance too much thought. Her primary concern was the creature's distress. "Shh, it's okay," she whispered, her voice filled with compassion. She carefully scooped up the furball, cradling it in her hands. It was so light, so fragile, and she felt a surge of protectiveness wash over her. She could feel its tiny heart beating rapidly against her palm. There," she said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe and warm inside." She quickly set up a makeshift bed for the creature in a small basket lined with soft towels. The furball curled up in the basket but continued to shiver. She then rummaged through her pantry, pulling out a small saucer and filling it with warm milk. The creature sniffed the milk tentatively before dipping its tiny nose into the liquid. It began to lap up the milk with delicate, cautious movements. Her heart ached for it, and she knew she had to do whatever it took to help this little one. Over time, Grandma Lizzy became more and more fond of her new furry friend. Within just 2 days, she had given him a name based on his playful antics with her beloved throw pillow, Fisher. "You little rascal!" she chuckled, watching him pounce and tumble across the living room rug. Grandma Lizzy, a widow of 5 years, had always found solace in the company of cats. Her late husband George had been allergic, but after his passing, she'd adopted a few feline friends to keep her company. Fisher was different. There was something special about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. As the weeks turned into months, Fisher grew rapidly. His fur, a unique blend of sandy browns and creamy whites, became softer and more luxurious. His eyes, when they finally opened, were a striking amber color that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Grandma Lizzy noticed these peculiarities, but didn't dwell on them. To her, Fisher was simply her beloved pet, regardless of his appearance. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Fisher would curl up on her lap during her afternoon tea, purring contentedly, as she read her favorite mystery novels. He'd watch intently as she tended to her prized rose garden, occasionally batting at a fallen leaf or chasing a butterfly. Before long, Fisher had become Grandma Lizzy's constant companion. She even started taking him on short outings, much to the delight of her neighbors and friends. At the local supermarket, Fisher would sit patiently in the shopping cart's child seat, drawing admiring glances and friendly pats from other shoppers. They'd often remark on what an unusual cat he was. Grandma Lizzy would simply smile and nod, proud of her unique pet. Tuesday nights became a particular highlight for the duo. Grandma Lizzy had been attending the weekly trivia night at the Rusty Nail Pub for years, but now she arrived with Fisher perched on her shoulder like a parrot. The pub owner, a jovial man named Bill, made an exception to the no pets rule for Fisher, who quickly became the mascot of trivia night. "Here comes the Lucky Charm," Bill would announce as Grandma Lizzy and Fisher entered, much to the amusement of the other patrons. As the months flew by, Grandma Lizzy's love for Fisher grew even stronger. Life had been transformed. The loneliness that had plagued her since George's passing and the subsequent death of her previous feline companions had all but disappeared. Fisher filled her days with joy, laughter, and companionship. It was during one of their quiet evenings at home that she realized it had been nearly 3 months since Fisher had come into her life. She also realized that she had never taken him for a proper checkup at the vet. "Oh my," she said aloud, causing Fisher to look up from his spot on the rug. "We've been having so much fun that I completely forgot about your health check. Fisher, we'll have to remedy that tomorrow." The next morning, Grandma Lizzy called the local veterinary clinic and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. As she hung up the phone, she felt a twinge of nervousness. It was silly, she told herself. After all, Fisher seemed perfectly healthy. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Her gut feeling would prove to be right. This routine visit was about to turn her world upside down, revealing a truth about Fisher that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her beloved pet. The following day dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring morning. Grandma Lizzy woke early, her usual routine slightly altered by the anticipation of Fisher's vet appointment. As she went about her morning tasks, she found her eyes constantly drawn to Fisher. The creature was curled up in a patch of sunlight on the windowsill, his unusual fur gleaming with hints of gold and cream. "Come on, Fisher," Grandma Lizzy called softly, picking up the carrier she had borrowed from her neighbor. "It's time for your checkup." Fisher allowed himself to be coaxed into the carrier with minimal fuss. His amber eyes, so unlike any cat she'd ever seen, peered out at her curiously. The drive to Dr. Anderson's veterinary clinic was short, but filled with a mixture of emotions for Grandma Lizzy. She hummed softly to herself, a habit she'd developed over the years to calm her nerves. Fisher, for his part, remained unusually quiet in his carrier. The clinic was a small, neat building on the outskirts of Township where its pale blue exterior and white trim gave it a friendly, welcoming appearance. As Grandma Lizzy entered, the familiar scent of antiseptic and pet shampoo greeted her. "Good morning, Lizzy," chirped Sally, the receptionist. Her bright smile faltered slightly as she caught sight of Fisher in his carrier. "Oh my, is that your new pet? He's quite something." Grandma Lizzy nodded, a proud smile on her face. "This is Fisher. We're here for his first checkup." They didn't have to wait long before Dr. Anderson, a kind-faced woman in her 40s with salt and pepper hair, called them into the examination room. The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly as Fisher emerged from his carrier, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "So, Lizzy, tell me about Fisher," Dr. Anderson began, gently running her hands over the creature's body. Grandma Lizzy recounted how she had found Fisher, describing his rapid growth and unique behaviors. As she spoke, Dr. Anderson's expression grew increasingly puzzled. She examined Fisher's eyes, ears, and mouth with growing bewilderment. Finally, the vet straightened up and looked at Grandma Lizzy with a mix of confusion and concern. "I'm not quite sure how to say this," she said slowly, "but this isn't a kitten." Grandma Lizzy blinked in surprise. "Not a kitten? But what else could he be?" Dr. Anderson shook her head. "I'm not sure. His physical characteristics don't match any domestic cat breed I'm familiar with, and some of his features, well, they're unlike anything I've seen before." A moment of silence fell over the room as both women looked at Fisher, who was now contentedly grooming himself on the examination table, seemingly oblivious to their confusion. "I'd like to run some tests," Dr. Anderson continued. "Blood work, DNA analysis. It might help us figure out exactly what Fisher is." Grandma Lizzy nodded, her mind whirling with questions and possibilities. Part of her was worried. What if Fisher was sick or needed special care she couldn't provide? But another part was intrigued. Fisher had always been special to her, and now it seemed he might be truly one of a kind. "Of course, doctor," she agreed. "Whatever you think is best." The vet worked efficiently, collecting the necessary samples, while Fisher remained surprisingly cooperative. "We'll rush these to the lab," Dr. Anderson explained. "I should have some preliminary results in a few days." As they prepared to leave, Grandma Lizzy felt a mix of emotions: anxiety about what the tests might show, curiosity about Fisher's true nature, and an overwhelming sense of protectiveness towards her unusual pet. "Don't worry, Fisher," she whispered as they left the clinic. "No matter what those tests say, you'll always have a home with me." While waiting for the test results, Grandma Lizzy did some research on her own. She scoured the internet and old books, trying to find anything that matched the Furball's description. After hours of searching, she stumbled upon an article about a rare endangered species that looked strikingly similar to her new friend. The article mentioned that these creatures were often mistaken for kittens due to their size and fur. It described the species in detail: large pointed ears, slender noses, and sandy brown and creamy white fur. It even mentioned their unique way of drinking, which matched what she had observed in her little Furball. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. Could it be that she had found one of these rare creatures? Her heart raced as she read on. The article explained that these animals were incredibly rare and often found in harsh desert environments. They were not suited to domestic life and needed specific care to thrive. She felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. If her new friend was indeed one of these rare creatures, she had a significant responsibility on her hands. She would soon find out, and her selfless decision would leave you feeling emotional. Finally, she received a call from Dr. Anderson about the lab results. "It's not a kitten, well, not the regular kind anyway," Dr. Anderson confirmed, her voice filled with a mix of astonishment and concern. "It's a baby palace cat." Grandma's heart skipped a beat. Shocked and confused, she wondered what the vet meant. If it was some kind of cat, it meant this was definitely a kitten, right? Dr. Anderson continued, "Palace cats are not meant to be pets. They are wild cats that require a specialized environment and care that we can't provide here. It's best to contact a wildlife rescue organization that can ensure it gets the proper care and attention it needs." Grandma felt a pang of sadness at the thought of parting with Fisher, but she knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. She couldn't bear the idea of keeping Fisher in an environment that wasn't suitable for his well-being. Her compassion and sense of duty outweighed her personal attachment. The days since the vet's call had been a whirlwind of emotions for Grandma Lizzy. She sat in her favorite armchair, her eyes fixed on Fisher as he playfully chased a ball of yarn across the living room floor. The joy that usually filled her heart at such a sight was now tinged with a profound sadness. She knew their time together was coming to an end, and the realization hit her like a physical ache. "Oh, Fisher," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Why did it have to be this way?" She had contacted the Wildlife Rescue Organization, and they had been incredibly understanding and supportive. They'd explained the process of rehabilitating Fisher and eventually introducing him to others of his kind. It all made perfect sense, and yet her mind wandered back to the past few months. She remembered the joy Fisher had brought into her life, filling the empty spaces left by her late husband's passing. She thought of their Tuesday night trivia adventures, the way Fisher would curl up on her lap during afternoon tea, and how he'd watch her tend to her roses with those curious amber eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes. The thought of her home without his presence seemed unbearable. For a moment, she entertained the idea of keeping Fisher. Maybe she could learn to provide the specialized care he needed. Maybe. But as quickly as the thought came, she pushed it away. She knew it wasn't right. Fisher wasn't just an unusual pet, he was a wild animal, one that belonged with his own kind in an environment suited to his needs. "You're going to have such wonderful adventures, little one," she said, gently stroking Fisher's soft fur, "and I'll always cherish the time we had together." On the day Fisher was set to leave, Grandma Lizzy experienced a range of emotions. Yes, it would hurt to say goodbye. Yes, she would miss Fisher terribly. But she also felt a growing sense of pride. She had been given a precious gift, the chance to care for and love this extraordinary creature. Now it was her turn to give Fisher the greatest gift of all, the chance to live the life he was meant to live. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She opened the door to find two kind-faced individuals from the Wildlife Rescue Organization. "Hello, ma'am," the woman greeted gently. "We're here for Fisher." She nodded, unable to speak for a moment, then led them into the living room where Fisher was curiously watching the newcomers. As she carefully placed Fisher in the specially designed carrier, Grandma Lizzy felt a surge of pride. She had saved this precious life, nurturing it from a tiny, helpless creature to the healthy young palace cat before her. And now she was ensuring it had the best possible chance at a full and natural life. "Take good care of him," she managed to say as she handed over the carrier. "We will," the man assured her, his eyes full of understanding. "And thank you. What you've done is truly remarkable." Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal for Grandma Lizzy. She found herself thinking of Fisher often, wondering how he was faring in his new environment. Then, one sunny afternoon, after about 6 months, a letter arrived. Her hands trembled slightly as she recognized the logo of the Wildlife Rescue Organization on the envelope. Inside, she found a heartfelt note of thanks, praising her quick thinking and compassion. But it was the next part that brought tears to her eyes. "We're pleased to inform you that Fisher is thriving in our care. He's grown considerably and has begun to socialize with other palace cats. Our team believes he will be ready for release into a protected habitat within the next month." Enclosed was a photograph of Fisher looking healthy and alert, his distinctive ears perked up as he explored his new surroundings. Grandma Lizzy felt a wave of deep satisfaction wash over her. She had made a real difference in Fisher's life, and in doing so, she had contributed to the conservation of a rare and beautiful species. She smiled as she placed the photo of Fisher on her mantelpiece, next to the family photos and mementos of a life well lived. Her home might be a little quieter now, but her heart was full, knowing that somewhere out there, A little palace cat was getting ready to live the life he was meant to live. Have you ever encountered an unexpected animal in need? Perhaps you've rescued a lost pet, helped an injured bird, or even just provided food for a stray cat. We'd love to hear your stories of animal encounters and acts of kindness.